In this day and age, it is extremely unusual. In fact, it's damn near unheard of for a world champion to have a voluntary title defense against an unheralded fringe contender and not have a rematch clause in place should he lose to the fringe contender. This is something that used to happen a lot back in the days in boxing, where it wasn't standard for a boxer, a world champion, to have a rematch clause in place when he's making a voluntary defense. But in this day and age, it is absolutely standard. Again, particularly when you're taking on an unheralded challenger. If you're taking on a challenger who is a cash cow, then in order to get that fight, you might have to forget about rematch clauses. But when you're a James Degale and you're taking on the likes of a Caleb Truax, to not have a rematch clause in place really is a perfect demonstration, a perfect example of how arrogant, overconfident, and complacent James Degale was going into this fight. His mindset was so complacent. And not only James Degale, but the people around him, really. Al Heyman, his advisor, where was Heyman advising him to make sure he had a rematch clause in place? That's just standard in boxing today. Frank Warren, well, he was dealing with Frank Warren on a fight-by-fight basis, so I can't blame Warren as much as Heyman. But even James Degale's manager, who is his manager? Does he even have a manager at this point? Is he self-managed? The people around him, for him to not have a rematch clause in place, incredible. Because again, this is unheard of in boxing today. For you to be making voluntary defenses against, lesser known opposition and not have a rematch clause in place. But as I said in my post-fight video, James Degale's biggest weakness, or one of his biggest weaknesses, has always been his arrogance, his overconfidence. And a couple people took me up on that and said, no, Degale's not overconfident. He needs to be confident. Of course he needs to be confident, but there's a point where you can become too confident, where it gets to the stage that where the line between confidence and delusion becomes blurred. And that's where James Degale's at. He's at the point where confidence and delusion, the line between them has become very, very blurred. He was talking about this Truax fight being an easy fight, openly talking about it. He was talking about fighting Chris Eubank Jr. and George Groves or whoever the winner of the World Boxing Super Series is going to be. He was talking about fighting David Benavidez before he takes on the winner of the World Boxing Super Series. And again, it's good to have ambition. It's good to be confident. But you can't be so confident. You can't have such an inflated view of yourself that it's so far from reality. Because then when reality hits you, you end up losing to people like Caleb Truax. And I'll give you another example. I'll give you a few examples of how James Degale doesn't really seem to have a grip on reality, where his confidence is far higher than it actually should be, to the point where he's not realistic about situations that he gets himself into. He took a terrible beating from Badou Jack. Yes, it was a competitive fight, but James Degale took a hell of a lot of punishment in that fight. Badou Jack was far stronger physically than James Degale was. After the fight, he immediately wanted a rematch. And again, I commend him for that kind of confidence on one hand. But then in the following months, he's been talking about he'll go up to 175 to fight Badou Jack, saying that it'll be easier next time. Think about that. He says he can step up to 175 and take on Badou Jack, and that it wasn't the real James Degale last time. This time it will be easier. What is he talking about? If he wants to take on Badou Jack at 175, I give him props. But don't go into that fight, that potential fight, with the mindset that this is going to be easier. It wasn't the real James Degale. No. You need to go into that fight thinking, actually, this is going to be at least as tough as it was last time around, but I'm going to make certain adjustments from a technical point of view to stop myself getting hit as much, but it's still going to be a very, very tough fight. You hope for the best, but you prepare for the worst. That's what consummate pros do. But James Degale has such an overinflated view of himself that he doesn't even feel like he has to prepare for the worst. Certainly didn't against Truax. Certainly didn't against George Groves when they fought. Remember that? saying that he was going to knock George Groves out in 4 rounds and it's going to be easy. It's not going to be a problem. This is the overconfidence that I'm talking about. Overconfidence leads to complacency. And this is what you get. Porky Medina, he was acting like that was going to be an easy fight. It turned out to be a tough fight. Even Baddy Jack, he said, Jack is not in my league. Well, actually, no. He was saying Jack is not in my league a long time before he fought Jack. Going into the Jack fight, he was actually giving him respect, to be fair. He did say, I feel like I'm a level above, but he's a very good fighter. He did say that, I think, anyway, in the lead up to their fight. But yeah, you know, James Degale's complacency, his overconfidence comes back to bite him in the butt time and time again. And on top of all that stuff, Carl Froch tweeted, let me read the tweet out actually. In regards to Degale's loss to Truax, Carl Froch said, live the life of a fighter or you will get found out. And this is Carl Froch alluding to rumors, and I personally know people that have seen James Degale out and about. So to me, they're not rumors, but since I wasn't there myself, I'll call them rumors. Rumors that James Degale loves the nightlife a little bit too much. There have been rumors about him for years, being seen in nightclubs, drinking, out late, etc., etc. This is what is said to be going on in James Degale's private life. And that's what it seems Carl Froch was alluding to. And it's absolutely true. You can't go out as a fighter and live the same life as a civilian. It don't work. You're not going to get the best out of yourself. At the top level, the margin of error is so small that the difference between winning and losing a fight could be whether you decide to go out drinking in your downtime. You know, that could be the difference. And it's not even just that, it's the attitude. James Degale has the attitude of, I'm so good that I can go out drinking and partying and still get in the ring and beat everybody up. This is his mentality. You know, this is when I talk about overconfidence. This guy thinks that he's better than he actually is. You have to have a realistic view of yourself. Confidence is great, but you can't be so confident that you become deluded and you think you're Superman or something and nobody can touch you on your night. James Degale always talks about being on his night. Well, you're not going to be on your night unless you take every opponent seriously. Unless you cross all the T's and dot all the I's, you're going to find that your night doesn't come very often. If you're out partying and boozing, you're not going to have your night very often. You understand? So, yeah. Where Degale goes from here, I don't know. But it's similar to what I said in the post-fight video. I think James Degale's on his way down. I think the punishing fights and the injuries have taken their toll on him. And if he does have anything left, I think he needs to get rid of Jim McDonnell, which he may well do, and take it from there. He's going to have to humble himself at this point, including business-wise, because he's been dictating to Eddie Hearn and dictating to Frank Warren, and Warren, in this instance, gave him what he wanted. But now that he's no longer world champion, he's actually going to have to go back to these promoters and be a lot more humble, you know, and that's the sad thing, because I do rate James Degale in terms of his business, at least up until now, because the not putting a rematch clause in place was terrible. But apart from that, I rated him in terms of his business because he didn't allow promoters to use him the way they use a lot of other fighters. So I rated that. But yeah, he's going to have to bring himself down a peg or two in order to talk to promoters from here on in, because, you know, it's not going to be quite the same. And it was interesting as well, watching the Truax fight, that the crowd actually cheered when Truax was announced as the winner. And they actually booed, I think, when the first scorecard was read out as a draw, as if the crowd were, you know, worried that Truax might get robbed. And remember, this is in James Degale's hometown. That shows how unpopular James Degale has become in a certain sense, you know. But a lot of times with British fans, they they do have quite a lot of respect. I guess this is fans worldwide to a certain degree, but with British fans, I've seen it many times. They do have a lot of respect for a guy who comes over and beats their hometown favorite. You know, a good example would be, well, there are many examples, but, you know, Tony Thompson when he beat David Price, Terence Crawford when he beat Ricky Burns, so on and so forth. Even when it's two British fighters and you've got one fighter who is the attraction and the other fighter was supposed to be the opponent, the crowd can switch. They can be cheering one guy to the ring and then booing him out of the ring. The Carl Froch George Groves first fight was a good example. That was a big pro Froch crowd who cheered him into the ring. After the fight, they were booing Froch in the post-fight interview and they were cheering Groves. They liked the fact that Groves, to them, Groves was had the moral victory in the fight. You know, they didn't like the stoppage. They didn't like Froch's attitude of not giving Groves much credit. And yeah, they cheered Groves and booed Froch. So the British boxing public can be like that. You know, they can be, you could say it's fickle, but on the other hand, you could say they go with fairness over who their hometown hero is. At least sometimes, you know, at least a fair amount of times. Maybe not all the time, but at least a decent amount of the time they do. So anyway, yeah, let me stop waffling here. Let me know your thoughts on James Degale. Where should he go from here? Does he have anything left? Do you agree with my assessment that his arrogance is one of his biggest weaknesses? Not his only weakness. He has other weaknesses too. Don't get it twisted. But arrogance just seems to be one of his biggest. And I have compared it to Lennox Lewis in the past. He's obviously not as good a fighter as Lennox Lewis was, but Lewis had that same issue where he was just so dismissive of opponents and just so arrogant in his attitude. His confidence was too much at times, Lennox Lewis. He needed to put a lid on his confidence and try and be a little realistic at times. And it happened a few times with Lennox Lewis. It happened when he fought Frank Bruno. You know, that was one of the first times, actually. When he fought Bruno, he just thought he was going to go out there and blast Bruno out in one round. He had no respect for him at all. And it turned out to be a very tough fight. Oliver McCall, similar situation. He was totally overlooking McCall. He didn't think McCall was remotely difficult as an opponent. And he got knocked out. Same with Hasim Rahman. He was out filming a movie in LA where he was supposed to be acclimatizing to the atmosphere in South Africa, to the altitude. Because Rahman was doing that. Lewis was out in LA, you know, and only flew in like a few days before the fight. That's how arrogant this guy was. And that's what led to Lewis's two losses was the arrogance, the overconfidence. But as a great champion, arrogant or not, he was able to avenge those losses. James Degale, certainly not as good as a Lennox Lewis. But will he be able to bounce back from this, win a world title again, and be a real force on the world scene? I doubt it, you know, I doubt it. A lot of people have mentioned James Degale's lack of physical strength. And this is something which has been going on for years, his lack of physical strength. Some people say, well, he's strong in some fights and not strong in others. I'm not sure about that. I think James Degale can look strong when an opponent decides to allow Degale to come forward. Yeah? When an opponent decides to push Degale back, it's not that difficult. Truax was a blown-up middleweight and he pushed Degale back. Porky Medina pushed Degale back. You go back earlier on in his career, there was a guy Polish. He fought him after the George Groves loss. I think it was like a European title fight. That guy pushed Degale back. Lucien Boutte pushed Degale back. Badu Jack pushed Degale back. I mean, loads of fighters have out-muscled and out-strengthed James Degale. He's not particularly strong as a super middleweight. He's an okay puncher when he catches you clean. You remember he dropped Badu Jack in their fight. He dropped Andre Durrell when they fought. So when he catches you clean, he can be a decent puncher. Nothing special though. But his physical strength is just, nah. He's never been a particularly physically strong guy. That is an issue for him. And stylistically, he's always had issues with guys who keep their hands high and walk him down because they don't give him many openings. And that's what we saw obviously with Truax. He just struggles with that particular style. If you stand off James Degale and box with him, he tends to have an easier time. When you're blatantly on the back foot moving around like Groves, well, he can struggle with that too. But when you're actually in the middle of the ring, boxing at long range with him, he tends to prefer that. Darrell boxed at long range with him. Degale did pretty well against Darrell. I mean, he won the fight. It was one of his best performances. So, yeah, he likes it when you give him space. Gonzalez, the guy he fought at Wembley, that guy gave him space. Degale was able to do his thing against him. Even Periban, who normally applies pressure, he gave Degale a lot of space when they fought, and Degale was able to get his punches off and deal with Periban. So, yeah, styles make fights at the end of the day, and there's a particular style that James Degale don't like. Hands high, walking forward, etc. You know, I always felt that James Degale, the best version of James Degale, the one who beat Darrell, for example, would beat Carl Froch. Or at least beat the Carl Froch towards the end of Froch's career when the Degale fight didn't happen. And I don't necessarily take that back. I think, you know, you still would. Because Froch wasn't at his best towards the end of his career, for one. And for two, Froch is not a guy who comes forward with his hands up. So he's going to be coming forward at Degale, and his chin is going to be open for Degale's counters. And that's why I think it's a different situation than, you know, these, and Degale's not at his best now anyway, so he's lost to Truax, you know, it is what it is. But the Degale who fought Darrell, you come at him, you better have your hands up or you're going to get clipped. Carl Froch was notorious for having his hands down. He was notorious for it and always getting clipped, relying on his chin. So, you know, I felt like a Degale, the one who fought Darrell, would have a good chance of beating Froch on points. You know, some people are going to say that's ridiculous now and whatever, but, you know, whatever the case may be, we're never going to find out at the end of the day. Just because you think Froch is supposed to beat Degale, it don't mean he would have done. Degale was supposed to beat Truax. Lennox Lewis was supposed to have beaten Hasim Ratman and Oliver McCall. Loads of things are supposed to happen, but they don't happen. There are loads of results in boxing which go totally against the form book. Loads of results in boxing which go totally against the bookie's odds. And totally against what the majority of us think is going to occur. I mean, going into the Truax fight, we all were picking James Degale. James Degale was something like a 100-to-1 favorite. Think about that. You bet £100 on James Degale, you only get £1 back. That's how massive a favorite he was to beat Truax with some bookies. So, you know, people, even the people who don't like Degale, going into the Truax fight, they were cussing Degale. They were massively critical of him for even taking this fight. Oh, this is a terrible fight. This is awful. He's going to knock Truax out in one round. I mean, I said that Truax is not that bad, but I expect Degale to win and win pretty handily. And I was actually criticized by some people for saying that Truax is not that bad. And there were people in the comment section talking about, oh, Degale's going to knock him out easy. How can you say this guy's not that bad? And, you know, so, yeah, the form book is cannot always be relied upon, basically. Yeah. Anyway, let me really stop waffling now because I'm going on and on here. Drop your comments in the comment section below. Let me know how you feel. It's happening. I'm out.